Genesis Moore wiped her hands on the thin apron tied around her waist as she stepped through the towering iron gates of the Halstead estate. The garden party was already in full swing, guests dressed in shimmering gowns and tailored suits weaving between elaborate flower beds. The scent of fresh roses mingled with the sharp tang of expensive cologne and the clink of fine china. Genesis moved quietly, a respectful nod here, a soft smile there, careful not to draw attention to herself in her simple uniform. She was a dishwasher, nothing more, and she felt every eye on her, judging the worn shoes beneath her neatly pressed apron. Around her, the air was filled with laughter and hushed conversations about art collectors and stock portfolios, worlds far from the small apartment where she lived alone after years of hard labor to support her ailing mother. Genesis got to work behind the long table of gleaming silver trays and crystal glasses, scrubbing, rinsing, hoping no one would notice her presence. But then, the smooth hum of the party was shattered by a collective gasp. The host's daughter, Vivian Halstead, stood in the center of the patio, her voice sharp as she pointed a trembling finger at Genesis. You broke my grandmother's teapot. That priceless heirloom. How could you be so careless?" Guests turned as one, eyes narrowing with suspicion and thinly veiled disdain. Whispers rippled through the crowd, some muttering about the dishwasher's place, others openly mocking her. The host, a stern man with a tight jaw, stepped forward. "Genesis, apologize immediately. You're fired. Leave at once." Heat burned Genesis's cheeks as she lowered her gaze, fighting tears. She gathered her things silently, her heart pounding louder than the soft music that had resumed. Outside the gates, she swallowed the lump in her throat, alone but certain, she had not broken the teapot. Genesis Moore sank onto the threadbare couch in her tiny living room, the dim lamplight casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper. The events of the Halstead estate replayed relentlessly in her mind, the clamorous accusation, the piercing finger, the cold dismissal. Her shaking hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm tea, but the bitterness on her tongue was nothing compared to the taste of humiliation lodged deep in her chest. She no longer felt the comforting familiarity of the small apartment she had called home for years. Now, it seemed merely a cage echoing with the sounds of judgment and scorn. Night after night, sleep eluded her. She would lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, each breath heavy and restless. The taste of food had vanished. Even the aroma of the herbs she once found soothing now churned her stomach. Her phone remained silent, save for messages of rejection from prospective employers who had heard the rumors swirling around the shattered teapot incident. To them, Genesis was guilty until proven otherwise, a dishwasher who had dared to cross invisible social boundaries and failed. The harsh reality of her life settled over her in these quiet moments. Genesis's past emerged vividly in the flickering candle of memory. Once, her name had been spoken of in the hopeful tones reserved for those with promise. She had been an exceptional student in culinary arts, her hands graceful and sure as she mastered the knife's edge and the delicate dance of flavors. She imagined her mother's proud smile, the woman whose frailty mirrored Genesis's fierce resolve. But life demanded sacrifices. When her mother fell ill with a chronic condition, Genesis had no choice but to abandon her schooling. The tuition fees and dreams were laid aside to keep the refrigerator stocked and the rent paid. She became a caretaker and a worker, juggling shifts in diners and neighborhood kitchens while tending to her mother's needs and medical appointments. Her dreams simmered on low flame, often suffocated beneath the weight of everyday survival. Scenes of those years floated unbidden into her mind, the quiet evenings spent by her mother's bedside, reading softly to ease fears, the hurried meals snatched between jobs, the exhaustion that tugged at her bones but never broke her spirit entirely. She recalled the small victories too, mastering a sauce or perfecting a recipe shared with a friendly patron. These fragments of hope kept her moving forward, even when the world felt indifferent or cruel. Now, even this modest life threatened to unravel. The job at the Halstead estate was the first real break she had earned in years, a chance to steady herself, to prove that despite her setbacks, she could hold her own in any kitchen. It was a step towards something better, a foothold she had clutched with determination. Being a dishwasher was not glamorous, but it was honest work, and it filled her with quiet pride. Until that shattered teapot and the sweeping condemnation erased any sense of belonging she had meant to forge. Her reflection in the cracked mirror caught her eye, a stark reminder of how far she had fallen, or perhaps how far she had climbed against the odds. The face looking back was tired but unyielding. With each breath, a stubborn ember of resilience glowed beneath the surface, refusing to be extinguished by disgrace. There was no time for self-pity, Genesis told herself. The world might see her as nothing more than a mere dishwasher, easily scapegoated and dismissed. But inside her, she held a reservoir of strength forged by years of hardship and sacrifice. She could not let this false accusation be the final blow. Somewhere beneath the shame and fear, a fierce resolve began to rise. She would find a way to clear her name, even if it meant standing alone against an elite world that was quick to judge and slow to forgive. For now, the small apartment offered no answers, only silence to fill the void left by the shattered trust and broken dreams. But Genesis Moore, dishwasher at the Halstead estate, was not ready to disappear into that silence. On a restless afternoon, Genesis Moore sat by the worn kitchen table, staring blankly at the chipped edge of a plate. Her mind, however, was elsewhere, caught on a fragment of a conversation she had overheard during the chaos at the Halstead estate. It was a small detail, almost drowned out by the louder noises of accusation, but it now rang loudly in her memory. Vivian Halstead, the host's daughter, had muttered something about the teapot's insurance value being a pain and, more intriguingly, about a recording on her phone made just in case. The thought flickered like a weak flame, but Genesis knew it had to be the thread she needed to pull. Gathering her courage, she dialed the mansion's number with trembling fingers. A cool voice answered, curt and businesslike. Genesis Moore. Yes, it's me. I wanted to talk about the incident with the teapot, Genesis began, cautiously hopeful. There was a pause. Then a sigh. That matter is closed. The evidence was clear, and we've moved on. Please understand there's nothing to discuss. She thanked the voice on the other end, though the rejection clung to her like a shadow. Refusing to let the door close completely, Genesis decided to take another approach. She returned to the mansion the following day, identifying herself as a former employee hoping for closure. The grounds were quieter now, with only a few workers tidying up after the event. She found herself drawn to a security guard named Mark, a man she had noticed on party day sharing brief nods with kitchen staff but keeping a distance from the elites. Mark listened as she spoke, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. You want to check the security cameras? He asked cautiously. Genesis nodded. Mark led her to a small room at the edge of the estate, where walls were lined with monitors streaming live feeds from cameras scattered around the garden and patio. The guards monitored the expensive art pieces and the guests' movements carefully. Hours passed as Genesis and Mark sifted through video footage from the day of the party. They watched the procession of people mingling under the sun, glasses raised in toast, laughter light in the air. Then, the moment frozen in time, the antique teapot standing in its place before the mishap. As the video played, Genesis's breath caught. Vivian Halstead appeared on screen, distracted, phone pressed to her ear, her other hand brushing against the table. The teapot wobbled precariously before toppling over onto the stone patio, shattering into countless pieces. Genesis leaned forward as Vivian immediately pulled out her phone, thumbs rapidly working. The recording feature was clearly starting, a quick voice memo perhaps, her face tense. Vivian seemed to speak softly, almost inaudibly. I broke the stupid teapot. But it's better if Genesis takes the fall. No one will believe otherwise. Genesis's heart pounded as Mark paused the footage and zoomed in on the phone in Vivian's hand, confirming it was a live recording. They waited for Vivian to leave the frame momentarily, and Genesis saw an opportunity. Quickly, with trembling fingers, she retrieved a courtesy phone nearby and dialed the number she memorized from the security office. Mark helped as well, borrowing a spare keycard to retrieve the phone Vivian had set down briefly on a nearby bench. Genesis's pulse spiked as she held the sleek device, its screen locked but accessible thanks to Mark's quick thinking. Pressing the voice memo app, she played the recording aloud. Vivian's clear, remorseful confession filled the small room, the voice shaky but unmistakable. The room fell silent after the recording ended. "It's proof," Genesis whispered, a mix of relief and cautious hope lifting her spirits. Mark nodded grimly. "Show this to the right people, and it'll clear your name. But be careful, this won't be easy." Genesis left the mansion with the phone in her purse, her hands steady now. Her mind churned with plans, knowing she was holding the key to reclaiming her dignity, and exposing a truth the Halstead family wanted buried. But the road ahead would require more than just possession of evidence. It demanded a voice loud enough to be heard above the whispers of privilege and prejudice that had tried to drown her out. Still, in that moment, Genesis Moore felt that ember of resilience glow brighter than ever before. Weeks had passed since Genesis Moore held the damning recording in her hands, the secret proof of Vivian Halstead's deceit. She had pondered carefully how to wield it, not as a weapon, but as undeniable truth. The chance came when she received an invitation to a gala hosted by the Halsteads, but this time as a guest of a local community organization that had recently taken an interest in supporting workers like her. Clad in a simple but elegant dress, Genesis arrived at the mansion once more, the grand entrance bearing witness to years of wealth and privilege. The gardens overflowed with lights that twinkled like stars, and floral arrangements cascaded from every corner, framing the glittering crowd inside. The air buzzed with sophisticated chatter, glasses clinking, and the soft strains of a string quartet. Genesis moved quietly through the crowd, a calm determination steadying her steps. Whispers floated around her as guests recognized the former dishwasher now present as an honored guest. Some narrowed their eyes, others offered hesitant smiles, but no one could ignore her presence. Finding a moment when the host's daughter, Vivian, was occupied by a group of wealthy investors, Genesis accessed the small portable speaker she had slipped discreetly into her purse. She stood near the central fountain, lifting her voice just loud enough to be heard over the soft music, catching the attention of nearby attendees. "Please listen," Genesis said, her voice clear and steady as murmurs rippled through the room. With a quick tap, the recording began. Vivian's voice echoed through the garden, candid and conflicted. "I broke the stupid teapot," she confessed softly in the recording, "but it's better if Genesis takes the fall. No one will believe otherwise." Gasps spread as eyes turned toward the host's daughter, whose face drained of color. The melody of the string quartet faltered as the crowd's focus shifted sharply toward Vivian. It wasn't Genesis, the recording made clear, and suddenly the entire atmosphere stiffened with tension. Whispers grew louder, transforming into murmurs of disbelief and betrayal. Guests who had once scoffed at Genesis now stared with newfound respect. A middle-aged woman, previously glaring coldly, shook her head. "This changes everything," she muttered. Vivian tried to speak, but the words failed her, eyes darting around as if searching for an escape not available. The host, a tall, imposing man, stepped forward to address the gathering, his voice heavy with reprimand. "I am deeply disappointed, Vivian. We will be taking urgent steps to address these actions internally." His tone did not waver, the weight of authority settling over the room like a verdict. The guests, sensing the shift, nodded silently in agreement. Several attendees approached Genesis quietly, some offering respectful apologies and expressing sympathy for the unfairness she had endured. Her cheeks warmed, a mixture of relief and cautious pride washing over her. This was not just vindication, it was a reclaiming of her voice. An elderly gentleman with spectacles approached her, extending his hand. "Ms. Moore, your courage is admirable. It takes strength to stand amidst such odds." Her fingers clasped his, the connection grounding her in the swirling currents of newfound respect. Vivian, meanwhile, retreated to a private corner, her posture slumped, a stark contrast to the poised woman who had orchestrated the false accusation weeks prior. The realization that her carefully crafted facade was crumbling was written plainly across her face. Outside, the soft night echoed with renewed hope for Genesis. Amid vaulted ceilings and opulence, a once dismissed dishwasher had carved a space for truth, a space that no amount of wealth or status could easily erase. The aftermath of the gala unfolded swiftly, rippling through the tight-knit circles of the Halstead family and their social sphere. Vivian Halstead faced swift and severe repercussions for her actions. The family's internal tribunal, convened at the insistence of the host, stripped her of several privileges. She was barred from attending family events, lost her role in the family's charitable foundation, and faced financial penalties imposed by her parents, a clear signal of their profound disappointment and need to uphold the family's reputation. For Genesis Moore, the consequences were strikingly different. Within days of the gala, the host personally reached out to her. The voice on the other end was tinged with regret and respect, an acknowledgement of the grave injustice done. "Ms. Moore," he began, "on behalf of my family and our staff, I offer a sincere apology for the way you were treated. You have shown remarkable grace and bravery under pressure." He continued, extending an offer to reinstate her position at the estate, this time with a thoughtful raise to reflect her dignity and the respect she deserved but had been denied for long. Moreover, aware of Genesis's aspirations, he recommended her to a local chef renowned for mentoring talented cooks, offering her a chance to revitalize her culinary dreams. The formal letter of apology arrived a few days later, carefully worded but heartfelt. It recognized the pain caused by the false accusation and expressed hope for healing and newfound respect. Meanwhile, the community organization that had supported Genesis throughout the ordeal stepped up in a significant way. They awarded her a scholarship to complete her culinary education, an opportunity to reclaim the dreams she had sacrificed years ago due to family responsibilities and life's harsh turns. On her first day back at the Halstead estate, Genesis felt the weight of eyes on her, but this time they carried a different tone, quiet acknowledgement, and for some, genuine respect. She worked alongside new colleagues who were aware of her story, their attitudes markedly kinder than before. The taste of acceptance was subtle but deeply satisfying. The day after her return, Genesis received a visit from the esteemed local chef. Tall and warm-eyed, he offered her encouragement, recognizing in her the same spark that had once fueled his own early beginnings in the kitchen. "Talent and resilience," he said softly, "will take you far. I'm here to help you get where you belong." Walking out of the estate gates after a long day, night had fallen. The sky was studded with stars, cool and calming against the night air. Genesis held her head high, the soft breeze tousling her hair as she stepped with renewed confidence and quiet pride. Gone was the invisible woman who had once been cast aside without a second thought. Now, she was a woman honored for her integrity, trusted for her skill, and resplendent in her hard-won dignity. Her journey, marked by struggle and perseverance, had come full circle, not through vengeance or confrontation, but through steadfast truth and unshakable resolve. Genesis Moore's future stretched before her, no longer confined by whispers of blame but illuminated by the promise of possibility.